beautiful. And what I really want to know is, what is good in your life today? This is Kia, and you're listening to another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. This is part 2 of the Kim Bailey story. And the first part was so real and so raw and so emotional that, like, I literally have been dreaming about her story and just everything she went through. It's really, really emotional. And if you heard it, then you can understand why. And she's kind enough to come back again. And we've got our emotions under control, me especially, even more, because every time it does not get easier to hear these stories. And she's come back, and she's going to tell us the rest of the story. So we're going to pick it up from after she left the military, and we're going to hear what happened and how she transitioned out and what she's doing now. And I think you're going to be really impressed because this girl is amazing. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome back Kim Bailey. Thanks for coming back, Kim.
Yes, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate all the flexibility here for the two times.
Girl, we are moms. We work. We're in quarantine right now. It's actually the 22nd today, the 21st of March.
The 21st.
And
yeah.
Yes. So you'll probably hear this a few weeks after that. But let me timestamp it by saying we are in our first week of quarantine. And so I'm doing my part by trying to get these interviews done and put out to help everyone ease their isolation boredom and have things to do, some good content that adds value to other people's lives and supports my veteran sisters. So while we're in this lockdown, essentially, and before we jump into the interview, I want to ask you, Kim, how are you doing with all of the quarantine and everything? How is everything where you are?
Yes, it is incredibly interesting. I am now working from home. Normally I have, my own office, but I'm at home now. So this is, I know you can see behind me, the listeners can't see me, but I just kind of set up my home office. It's very new. And so it's been okay, except that I have the kiddos at home, and so that's pretty chaotic. I have 4 of them, so it's been pretty chaotic here for that reason.
I feel you. I have 2, and it's like virtually impossible for me to get anything done. But my life hasn't changed that much because I work from home. So normally, and I work out at home, and half the time I don't have time to run to the grocery store and get groceries. So I grocery shop at home and have it delivered. So it's not that different, but in a way it is, because now it just feels like you can't go. You know what I mean? Like if I want to go meet up with my friends and stuff, it feels like you can't go. And it's for some reason having that invisible, like it's like being in the military again. You have that invisible rule over your life,
Yeah,
you can't go where you want.
I actually started because normally I hold like little support groups, and so we've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings. I've been using Zoom to the best of my ability. I'm still learning how to use it very well, but yes, Zoom has been a lifesaver because that's a way to stay connected. I do coffee dates, well, not coffee dates, but coffee support, support stuff on Zoom. And so it's kind of like meeting in a coffee shop, sort of.
Yeah, well, you can drink your coffee. I will tell you what, this week I have had a cocktail hour via Zoom. Wednesday, I'm day drinking with a friend of mine via Zoom. I have had some coffee dates via Zoom. I've gone live on Instagram with a girlfriend. She had her beer, I had my wine, and we talked about face masks for a little bit. So technology is amazing these days. I mean, 30 years ago,
Yes.
we couldn't have done this. It would have been really, really isolating. But because of technology, we can still hang out.
Yes, and staying connected is so important right now, especially with all the uncertainty. You have to find ways to stay connected with people. It's very important.
I agree. I agree. And as a coach, I have clients and students all over the globe. Right. And this has always been the case. And Zoom has always been our way, or a messenger video call has been our way to communicate. And so with this, it's just like, thank God we can keep going. And thank God, for the ability to work from home. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but thanks for sharing what's going on in your area. And I'm glad to hear that your family is safe and healthy.
Yes, thank you. You too. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's jump into it, shall we? I think we left off I was going to ask you, what was your transition like leaving the military?
Yeah, so transition was very interesting for me. After, I know we spoke a lot about some of the stuff that I had experienced while I was in the service, but I had gotten married, so my husband was still staying in the Army. And so when I was transitioning out of service, I thought to myself, oh, well, I'll just be a dependent, right? I'll be a military spouse. I don't really have to pay attention to the classes because I don't need to have my resume yet. I'm just going to go to school and be a stay-at-home mom with the kids, right? So I really didn't take that part too seriously, to tell you the truth. And, of course, that kind of bit me later on when things got, a little bit more challenging. But so when I transitioned out, I was really just focusing on school and focusing on the kiddos at home. And so right after that, I was in the inactive reserves after I left active duty, and we ended up in Virginia, so Fort Eustis, Virginia. And during this time, I was kind of trying to get into the military spouse, because that's a different culture. You go from, being in the service, being active duty, and now you're, a spouse, right? And a lot of the other spouses living in the neighborhood weren't prior service, And so that's a whole other culture, getting used to people. It's almost like, I don't want to say like, kind of like house, like one of those shows, like the Desperate Housewives. Some of the drama and some of the things that were going on were like, wow, we should have a TV show, which was fun because we had barbecues and we had issues, but then we also had a lot of drama and fights between some of the spouses, which is interesting. But so moving forward, my husband had actually gotten into some trouble. I don't know if I had mentioned this when we spoke last. He got into a little bit of trouble. I'm not going to speak too much on that because it's his personal story, and that's also a whole nother trauma when it comes to that. But I can speak about my experiences with that. He was accused of military sexual trauma.
Oh no.
Yes. And so it was really bad because I had just gotten through this hostile work environment. I had just escaped from that. And then I come into this new one, and it's a different type of hostility because I was a spouse at this time.
Oh my God! I can't even imagine what you must have gone through as the spouse.
It was insane, right? And I'm not even going to go into the details of it, but it was very, very traumatic. And so when he ended up getting put in the brig for a little while, I was still on base. So we were on base housing, and so of course. Basically it was kind of like a flashback of what had occurred when my military sexual trauma had happened. People found out about it. People knew about it. I had to take the kids out of daycare because they were in daycare while I was going to school. So I took them out. I stayed at home. I isolated myself because I felt like everybody was staring at me. I felt like I couldn't go anywhere outside of the house. I was getting letters at my door talking about, harassing letters. I was getting emails from some of the other moms. I mean, it was pretty traumatic. And so when he got arrested, and he got convicted of some of it. I'm not going to go into detail. And so the JAG lawyer that was attached to the situation, he had said that maybe me and my family could get an apportionment of the money, because his pay was, of course, decreased. And so I was waiting on that because, I didn't work at that time. You remember how I said I was just going to go to school? I wasn't going to worry about work.
Right.
And so I didn't have a job. And so I was wondering what I should do at this time. Around the same time, my mother had her aorta ruptured. So my adopted mother, the mother who raised me, her aorta had ruptured. So, and on top of that, I got deployment orders to go to Afghanistan. So all at once, it was like just rain, all this craziness just rained down on me. I got the deployment orders deferred, of course, so I didn't have to go to Afghanistan. But around that, it was so hectic because I had my 2 children, and I'm like, okay, how am I supposed to deploy? And now my husband's getting in trouble, and so my mom just had her aorta rupture, so she's not able to do a family care plan for me. It was really bad. And so,
okay,
yeah.
So I have a question before you go on. I have a question. So let me just get all of this straight because this is a lot of information. So you were a stay-home mom going to school. Your husband gets accused of a bunch of stuff and gets convicted for some of it. Meanwhile, you're living in base housing, and as we all know, the base is a small place, and base housing is even smaller. So you're getting harassing emails and letters to your door. You have to take your kids out of daycare even because they're not safe. You completely isolate yourself. Then you get orders to deploy, and your mom gets sick with her heart. Very sick. So that's very dangerous. Yes. Okay, all of this is going on. How were you feeling, though, at that time? Like, if you had to describe your feelings, what would you say you felt like?
Of course, I was devastated. I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean, for me, it was like flash forward. I needed to really quickly figure out how I was going to survive because I didn't have money, didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was going to do with my kids. And so, it was really overwhelming.
I can imagine. And probably afraid. And
around this time, go ahead. Yes, very much so. I mean, the people that I thought were my friends, that I thought were going to be supportive. I mean, because of the situation that occurred, I mean, it was kind of like they turned their back on me. And I don't know if it was because they didn't like me or they thought it had something to do with it. I think it was more that they just didn't want to be seen associating with me because of all the stigma that was attached to what happened,
Oh my God, that makes me so mad, and I'm going to tell you why. Because first of all, because I think that's drawn bullshit, to be honest. Okay, I think that's really bogus. Number one, if you're somebody's friend, you're their friend. When some drama kicks off, because this is how my mind works. So we're friends, and your husband gets accused of something like that. That's really devastating. Maybe it's because I'm empathic, but I would imagine that you're feeling horrified and shocked and surprised and would probably need a friend to help you through that. And instead, your friends turn their back on you. Like you didn't have anything to do with that. That's horrifying enough to have to go through. And then to not have any support system, that's just infuriating to me. I just had to express that.
Exactly. Well, going back to that, I didn't have a lot of support, of course, but there were some people who did feel sorry for me that were associated with me prior to, and so they would come because a lot of the military stuff, like where my housing was, it was like with a back door. It was attached to all the other units. So in the front, it was like a big walkway, so there wasn't a lot of traffic in the very front of my building. So sometimes people would go around the building and come to the front door and knock on it just to check to see if I was okay. So I did have very minimal. That was that was kind of like, I just want to see if you're okay because I don't want to be seen going to the back because that's where everyone lives. And so they would come to the front door sometimes and just to see if I was doing okay. And they kind of, to see what my plans were, like what I was going to do. But yes, you're right. I was completely shocked. It was out of left field. Like I had no idea. I mean, I knew that he was potentially, maybe cheating on me. I knew some of that was potentially happening, but I literally had no clue that this was going to happen. Yeah. It was insane.
That sounds insane. So tell me, how did you begin to like get your way out of this hole?
Yeah. So when all this happened, remember how I was kind of mentioning, I mean, for me, mental health and the, going to mental health services was really out of the question for me, just because I didn't feel like it was a safe place for me after what happened with that mental health provider. Remember I told you? So I never accessed services. I never went to see about getting support. It wasn't, I felt like it wasn't for me. And I also felt like nothing was wrong with me. I'm like, I can get through this. I've gotten through hard times before. I mean, of course, this is way different. But I'm like, I can do this. I've got it. And really what kept me in line was my children. I had the 2 babies. They were very young at that time. So they really were my lifeline, getting me through a lot of the stuff, as I had to be strong for them. And so when he got arrested, the JAG officer, remember I said he was trying to get an apportionment for us. Well, the commander decided to deny it. So the commander of the unit was like, no, I'm not going to give the family the apportionment because I feel like what he did was so egregious. They basically wanted to criminalize the family because of what he did. Wow. So me and my children didn't have any money. Yeah, they didn't give me any money. And they told me just to get off base, basically. They said that they would move my furniture, my belongings to wherever I wanted to go. And it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind type of reaction.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really bad.
They didn't care.
I felt very unsupported.
But they were going to move you.
Right. It was a very unsupported situation for me. And mind you, I'm a veteran, so I'm thinking. I actually at that time I wasn't really considering myself. That part wasn't really in my mind that I was a veteran. Remember how I said I was more focused on the whole military dependent situation than really accessing benefits. So I hadn't gone to get diagnosed with anything. I hadn't gone to get my benefits. I wasn't using anything except for the GI Bill at that time. And remember, so when I finally got diagnosed, I had PTSD and I had TBI, but I was never diagnosed or being treated at that time for the conditions that I had. And so I didn't have any veteran support services when I left base. And so what happened was, my children was really, like I said, they were my lifeline. They were keeping me, in line, basically. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with them. Well, my
I'll go bed all by myself. I will sleep in my bed.
Sorry. And so, so at this time, so I moved on base, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for a job. And so my mother-in-law at that time, she said, let me take the children for, a few weeks so you can get on your feet, so you can find a job, and then they can go ahead and move back. So, of course, as soon as the children left my care, I kind of spiraled out of control because they were really the ones that were keeping me in line. So when they weren't there anymore, I was really focusing on a lot of negative coping strategies. Of course, maladaptive coping, that was my go-to when I was going through the stuff that I was going through in the military. That was my go-to at that time, too, because at that time I was thinking survive by any means necessary. That's how I was surviving, was numbing and not thinking about what was happening. So I did get a job in a restaurant, so I was doing, restaurant job. Mind you, I was an EMT. I was a medic when I was in the military. I didn't reevaluate, getting my credentials. I didn't keep them up to date, so I wasn't able to work in the medical field when I left. And so the only relevant job I could probably get was in restaurant work at that time. And so, of course, that meant, once I started maladaptive coping, using alcohol and stuff like that, I kind of got into other types of substances during this time as well. And it wasn't well for me. It was very bad. I lost my place. I couldn't keep it. I couldn't pay the bills. So I was basically homeless, kind of couch surfing a little bit. And then I ended up getting arrested. I know we had talked about this previously. Mm-hmm. So I found myself basically spiraling out of control, was incarcerated, just reverting back to maladaptive coping. And then on top of that too, so then on top of that I was homeless for a little while too. Oh, and then I had a stroke. So during this time, because of the maladaptive coping that I was having, I was just going out of control, and I ended up having a stroke as well. So I had to recover from that. It was just a really big mess. When I say rock bottom, I hit rock bottom and just stayed there for a little while.
Wow, girl. So, okay. Maladaptive coping.
Yes, very unhealthy. Yes.
Right. So unresolved trauma, and you're coping with it the best way you can. You're numbing, and you're using alcohol and drugs to do it. And then you just spiraled down and hit rock bottom, and then from homeless, you ended up incarcerated?
Yes. So during that time, I had gotten arrested. And the funny thing is that, around this time, they had the Veterans Treatment Court available. But I think the reason why I wasn't offered that at this time was probably because I was female, and they probably didn't assume that I was a veteran. So I was never asked if I was a veteran. Again, I continually throughout my story, it's like I kept falling between the cracks, and nobody ever, was able to say, hey, are you a veteran? Do you need benefits? Do you need support? I just never received it. And so, of course, that reinforced this whole, I'm invisible, I'm not being seen, I'm not a veteran. It kind of reinforced that feeling of me not being a veteran.
I totally feel that. And it like, as you were saying that, I got like goosebumps. I got the chills, because it's so many women that slip through the cracks like that because no one says, hey, are you a veteran? Because they're so busy with the perception that veterans are men that they don't even think that it could be you. So many of our veteran sisters can identify with this story and likely have experienced it or some version of that since they left the military. I know I have, even if it's as simple as a letter coming to my home when I was married, addressed to my husband as the veteran so that we could refinance our house. You know what I mean? It's just that lack of consideration that I'm the veteran. He will never even served. You know what I mean? Like, and this is what you went through, and all these like little points along the way could have gotten help. Absolutely, yes.
It was so every single situation that I was in, when looking back into it, now that I'm where I'm at now, I can look back and say they were so preventable. They were incredibly preventable. I did not have to get to the place that I was in if somebody had just paid attention and said, hey, do you need support, or do you need help, or are you a veteran? And if you're a veteran, how do we get you connected to the right resources? It just never happened for me, ever. And even when I was in the courtroom and in the court system, I kept being paneled into civilian treatment facilities, civilian treatment courts, on all these types of modalities that they had for civilians. But I was never able to connect with those treatment forms. I just couldn't connect with the other people that were there. I was never able to really utilize those resources to the best of my advantage because they weren't speaking to me. They weren't speaking to the situations that I was in. And so I didn't really receive the correct support that I should have had during that time.
Wow. I mean, I wish I could say that it was surprising. I wish that I could say that.
It's really not.
It's so hard.
No, and even in some of the work, it definitely is. And even in some of the work that I do now, I mean, we'll probably get to that point, but, I do volunteer in the Veterans Treatment Court now with some of the young ladies that I see, and it's still, it's mind-blowing to me how people can fall through the cracks, so easily, right?
Yeah, I agree. So tell me, so you went through the court system, now you're incarcerated. What was that experience like for you? Yeah,
it was very interesting, and I can, at this point in my life, I can look back on it and look at it in a completely different light. Mm-hmm. But back then when I was going through all the things I went through, I mean, it was very eye-opening because, we talk about the legal system and we can see just on a regular day, outside of this whole veteran discussion that we're having, on a regular day, all the different stories and life experiences that some of those ladies have had. was just incredibly, and like almost like re-traumatizing for me. It's like I got to know some of these ladies. I became really good friends with them in the most unexpected place, right? I was able to step back and learn and observe and see the challenges that each of them have had in their own lives, but also just the challenges in the legal system. You know, some of the things I saw were just atrocious, you know, the way that some of the ladies didn't have basic rights in the jail system. I mean, that's a whole other topic discussion that I could probably talk on for a long time. Some of the things that I saw, but some of the young ladies that I was in there with had committed really serious crimes, like, you know, attempted murder and, you know, and things like that. And then you see some of the young ladies that came in that didn't get the medication that they needed. And, you know, we're sitting there like schizophrenic episodes. I mean, we saw so much, you know, overdose. We saw a lot of things in there. Yeah, it was very eye-opening experience for me, I would say. And you would think that would be the rock bottom that would change my perspective on life. But the second that I got out, I was back to maladaptive coping strategies because at that time, I wasn't getting the proper support or being connected to the right resources for me to succeed outside of court. So I ended up right back into the same situation I was in when I left, and then which ended up me getting reincarcerated again after that fact. So collectively, I was in jail for probably over a year, and it was a collective time frame.
Wow, girl. I mean, it's just heartbreaking, though, because it could have all been prevented. It could have
absolutely. I think so.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see because, like for me, looking at other individuals who are incarcerated, because I was able to do a complete 180 with my life after I was connected to the right resources. So you can just imagine, like, that's emotional for me because it's like, it didn't have to happen that way. And for a lot of the young ladies that I met in the jail system, they had some incredibly traumatizing stories. Like some of them were trafficked. You know, there's just so many different barriers, right, to in their life, right, that made them end up to the place that they're in. So it gave me a whole different perspective on life. So I can't even go back and say that it was a bad experience. You know, I feel blessed that I had the opportunity to meet those people and to hear those stories because it really did spark some change in my life. And kind of like the career field that I decided to go into was probably based on a lot of those life experiences and those people that I connected with while I was in jail. I'm even still talk to some of the young ladies that I met while I was incarcerated as well. I kind of keep myself up to date with the things that are happening in their life. And unfortunately, a lot of them did not end up as successful as me. And I think, you know, maybe for me personally, the veteran resources that I had for serving my country, it was easier for me to get back on my feet than maybe some of the other young ladies that I met.
Oh my God, that just breaks my heart because, you know, you think about that and it makes me think of, you know, what you put a bunch of women in an enclosed area and it automatically, and you take away a lot of their liberty, right, their civil liberties, it automatically makes me think of boot camp. And I know it's not the same.
Yes.
I do. Mm-hmm. I know it's not the same, but it automatically makes me think of boot camp and how you connect with people from all different ways of life. And everybody, all of the girls have different stories that ended them up in the military. Some of them were escaping horrible, traumatic childhoods and ran off to the military to try to get away from that. You know what I mean? I myself left home because I was in a dysfunctional situation and found that even though my mom prompted me to go to the military, I went partially because I knew that I was leaving behind an unhealthy place. So I can just imagine without any proper guidance, you know, what some of the girls end up doing without the proper coping mechanisms that they should have been given growing up, that they get, you know, manipulated by people into doing actions. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure that some of them just did really horrible things, but I don't know. I follow this guy, Wes Watson, and he was incarcerated, and now he's a businessman, and he does coaching and things like that. And he said something, you all know that I coach for the London Real Academy and with Brian Rose, and he was on an episode, and he said that that everyone who does these crimes, like even heinous crimes that you think of, have remorse. Every human feels bad for it at some point, even if they act like they don't, internally they do. And so knowing that we're all human and that we can all, give in to these, worse instincts and make these bad choices in our lives, you know what I mean? It just makes me so sad that the way the system is structured, that they can't it doesn't rehabilitate people. It is not a place where they say that it's rehabilitative, but it's not a place for rehabilitation at all. And I think that you can speak to that.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. And when you said the boot camp thing, I mean, yes, it is, because I think I mentioned before that unit cohesion, it's basically a form of trauma bonding. So when you're in a situation and you don't have your civil liberties and you're all kind of going through the motions, trying to survive, right, in this situation, it's like a form of trauma bonding. Like I made some really good close connections because that's what we did. We ate, we slept, we did our daily duties, chores, or whatever we had to do. We did it together, and we got through it together, right? Like we cheered when people got to leave. We're like, yes, don't come back. You got this. You're good. Empowering stuff. Those are human beings, and they've all had, a lot of them, majority of them that I had gotten to know had very traumatic childhoods. And it was really kind of like a survival. Like the things that they were doing was a lot of times survival stuff, right? Trying to survive in their environments that were toxic or abusive or whatever it is that they were coming from. Some of them trafficking. I did meet some young ladies who were in the prostitution ring that had been trafficked, right, by their own parents, some of them. And so you just hear these stories, and yeah, exactly. And they were lovely young ladies that had, the hard part about it is they have so much potential. I'm about to get really emotional. They have so much potential, and it's like cut short, by whatever environmental factors that they were experiencing that ended up in that situation. And then once they're in there, it's very difficult. It's like this routine cycle that they get into that it's very difficult to break free from, because think about when they leave jail or incarceration or prison or wherever they're at, it's like the housing resources. Where are they going to live? The food, how are they going to eat? If they have children, how are they going to get their children back, right? Or just whatever the circumstances are when they leave jail, usually it puts them in a place that they have to go back to survival techniques, surviving by any means necessary, and they end up right back to where they were. So, you see some of the ladies that are in there third, fourth times that they've been in there, and they're like regulars, and people know them. And the CEOs are like, oh, yeah, I know so-and-so, she's been in here 10 times. And it's just, it's very heartbreaking. And for me, because I was one of them, I was there with them, just along with them, so it just really did put life into perspective, and it really made me so humble, because it's like, this could happen to anybody. This could be anybody. Of course it was me at that moment. I was there, but it's like, nobody's above those situations, especially when you're surviving by any means necessary. It can happen to anybody.
Absolutely. I grew up in a nicer part of a rough area. Let's just say that. And I understand what desperation does to people. It's just you want to survive. The desperation can turn the nicest, most wonderful people into horrible people. I mean, look at those people who bought up all the toilet paper or all the hand sanitizer, right? Like that panic sets in, and you take leave of your proper senses. Now, common sense would tell you everyone should get a hand sanitizer so that we don't infect each other. But one person going to buy up everything, right? Because they think that they need to be protected, or they're going to profiteer on someone else's hardship, and that's horrible too. So, you know what I mean? So it's just, we can see that even the nicest, most wonderful suburbanite people can go do a run on the grocery store in a panic and make these choices that hurt the greater good. So, I mean, it's just
right.
Unbelievable. It's human. It's pretty much human nature. When you get desperate, you start to think differently, we'll say.
Right,
And I've seen it happen before, too, with friends and friends of friends who make these choices and end up, or drugs are involved, so they're not in their right frame of thinking anyway or whatever. So, I mean, it's definitely something I've seen in my life, and it can be the sweetest person you would never expect, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And especially when you're talking about trauma or when you're talking about mental health conditions, I mean, that's a whole other aspect of that situation. You know, many of them had mental health illnesses and challenges, and they weren't getting proper treatment, of course, while they were in the system, you know, and we watched it. I watched it firsthand when people were deteriorating, you know, from mental health conditions. They weren't just getting the proper treatment. It was, I mean, I can look back on it now with my degree, with the mental health background that I have, and just see the gaps. You know, I keep reverting back to these gaps and these areas that will slip through the cracks, you know, and totally preventable situations. You know, it's just, it's very heartbreaking and sad to watch.
Girl, so I can't agree more. I'm like, oh, my heart. But this is something, I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that, because it's something that has been sort of weighing on my heart for a while, because, you know, especially with female veterans and, you know, that end up in the system, just the way you did, you know, and when they come out, they don't have a place to go that's a proper resource, which is something that, you know, I think I've talked about on the podcast Artemisia before, and it's the foundation that I'm slowly putting together. And it would be a place like that where you could go afterwards to get to rehabilitate and get back to thriving in life, based on the concept of passageways, which is an episode I just recently released, and on the model that they created in Wichita, Kansas. And it's so necessary. It's so necessary because, you know, we just gotta help each other. I think we have to try to prevent these things from happening, which I know that you're already doing. So in a different way.
Absolutely.
So I want to get to what happened after you went in again and you came out. What turned your life around? What was the thing that was your aha moment that you were like, I've got to change my life and I'm going to do it now?
Yeah. So the last time that I was incarcerated, I had, right before I went in, because I was able to turn myself in to serve my sentence or whatnot. And so I was able to get my children, and I moved them to California to stay with my mom, because at that time she had she had recovered. So she ended up not dying from the situation, even though she was really close to death during that time. She ended up surviving, and so I was blessed in that. And I was able to move my children back to stay with her. So they went to stay with her, because not everybody has that opportunity, you know. So that was a blessing for me. And then so I went back was able to serve my sentence, knowing that they were safe and that they were okay. And during the last time I was there, I had to have one of those moments with myself, you know, because when you're in a situation and you just have white walls and you're just like, you're in a cell, like this small little square area of living, you know, and you're able to just really reflect on your life, right? And for me, it was like I was always asking questions like, what is wrong with me, and why can't I just get my life together? And those are questions I couldn't answer. I had no idea why I just couldn't get myself together. Of course, now looking back on it, I have a lot of answers, you know, for myself. But at that time, I was really just confused, like what was going on. I had to have that really honest sit down with myself and just, you know, and this is some good advice for other people who are experiencing not necessarily the incarceration, but if you're just stuck in a position where you just can't get out and you have no idea how to get over trauma or how to get over adversity in your life, I had to really sit down and be honest and reflect on my past and just grieve. Like you have to just grieve the loss of the person that you were. And you have to come to terms with that, because trauma will change you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's going to change your life. But you have to make a decision how it's going to change your life. You know, is it going to lead you into a place where you're just going to die over and over and over again. Because really, when the trauma happened to me, a part of me died. You have to really step back and you have to grieve that person. You know, the dreams, aspirations that you were going to have before trauma hit your life. That person's gone and won't ever come back, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? It could be a good thing. You could take it and you can turn it into a positive. You can reframe your narrative of your life and just change it into a good thing. And I came to a crossroad in my life where I decided that my story was not going to end here. I was not going to allow my story to have no purpose. You know, and that's basically where I was at a time in my life where if I had continued to go the way that I was, I would have died. I wouldn't have been alive, or I would have done something incredibly risky, right? And probably, I don't know if I would have been here. So I had to make that decision, you know, to change the narrative of my story, to understand that it wasn't going to end here, and I was going to do something good, turn my pain into a purpose, right? And so when I was released, I petitioned the judge to let me go to California and to serve, because I had to do a probationary period, of course, and normally you're not allowed to leave because you have to do face-to-face appointment. But I petitioned the judge to allow me to go home, and they let me. They let me move. I went home. I was able to enroll in school. So the first thing that I did was get myself enrolled with my GI Bill to pick up where I left off, you know, with the GI Bill.
Right.
And I enrolled in school, and I actually had to pave my way for a work study. So I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the work study program at the VA. So if you're going to school and using your GI Bill, you can kind of work through a work study program through the VA, and they pay you. I think it's like minimum wage, or maybe a little bit less than minimum wage, but you get to work in a veteran, like some sort of a helping profession, right, with veterans. So you get to work with veterans, and then you get paid while you're going to school. So in my town, there wasn't really any work study positions open. I had to go searching for that. And so I ended up at the EDD, which is the Employment Development Department. And I had to ask them to create a position for me for a work study. So basically I had to advocate for myself. I had to know that was something that I could use. And they were like, well, yeah, we totally could use you. So I had to wait for them to create the position. They created the position. I went to work, and I started giving back to veterans. So at this point, I had not accessed disability or any type of health benefits for myself, but I was helping other people connect with those resources, which was really ironic because I hadn't accessed them myself. But I was doing resumes for other people, for veterans, and I was connecting them to resources, helping homeless veterans, and yet I'm like over here not even accessing them myself, which was really ironic. But somebody convinced me during the time when I was helping because, yeah, it's really interesting. And then someone was like, well, why don't you go there and apply for benefits? And I'm like, I guess I should. I never thought of it. So I ended up going and applying for benefits, and I was formally diagnosed with chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. And then when I was diagnosed, it was like the aha moment for me. Like all those times and all those questions I'd asked myself, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get my life together? It clicked. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's why. Yeah, that's the reason why I can't get over it, because I'm having all the symptoms. I'm having flashbacks. I'm having nightmares. I can't sleep. You know, because at that time, I also had the mild traumatic brain injury that was never treated. So I was having a lot of consequences from the not being treated, right, for the head injury that occurred. Right. So I was having a lot of cognitive problems. I was having a lot of memory problems. And I had no idea what was going on. So as soon as I was diagnosed with that, everything kind of fell into place for me. So that was very, very helpful for me to be diagnosed.
Oh my goodness, I can just imagine what that in and of itself was like an aha moment. Like, oh my God, wow, all of this is now explained.
Yes, and you know it's even more, like going into that more, once I started my education, because my bachelor's is in sociology, so and then I have a minor in military operations. So once I started school, and I started the work study program, and I finally got diagnosed, I started learning so much about human behavior and about the brain, because I took some psychology courses for my bachelor. And that was also, for me, that was a really defining moment, because I started understanding the brain, right, and the development of the brain. And I started looking at my own life through like a theoretical lens, and I was able to really put things into perspective for myself, because that's how my mind works. And, I thrive on understanding things and really analyzing things. I've always been a real self-analytical person, so it was very helpful for me to be able to educate myself on the terms and the symptoms and how my brain was reacting to these things. Because once you learn that, then you can start figuring out what triggers you have and how to best cope. So it's not a life sentence where you're just like, I'm never going to be able to get over this. You have to educate yourself on the best way for yourself to get over something like this. So education for me was that thing. And I just continued on and never stopped. So I got my master's. And I don't think I mentioned this to you, but I just got accepted into my PhD program. So I'm supposed to be starting that at the end of this month. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Oh, my God. Another thing. I mean, this story, like, you guys, seriously, did you hear that? I mean, of course you did. But, like, from incarceration to accepted into a PhD program, like a way to turn your life around and really do amazing things. Like, that is so incredible. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I decided that, because I think a really good coping tool for me was like just the servitude of others. And so that's why my master's is in social work. So I got my sociology degree. I got a job. I finally did get a job. I had to like petition. I mean, let me tell you, if anybody ever needs support on how to write letters and how to advocate for yourself, I'm the go-to person for that, because I had to advocate for my licenses. I had to advocate for my background checks. I had to go to boards and appeals and all those things and jump through all these hoops in order to get the job that I have now. I have a government job. So to get that job, to be able to get into the PhD program, to be able to get into my master's program and get those licenses to work clinically with people. I mean, I had to jump through all the hoops, because of my past, my criminal record and stuff. But it's so doable. Like, I can't tell people enough how doable it is. It's hard. It's hard work, and it's not easy, but it's completely doable. And everybody has the capabilities of doing this themselves. I mean, I had to go on special education, to help support some of the program stuff that I have because of my TBI and stuff. But I mean, if you utilize the correct resources and you are driven and you know what you want to do and you find that passion and purpose in your life, and it's completely doable.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I'm so happy for you. So, okay, I just have a couple of more questions for you, because you've given me so generously of your time. And I know it's late now for us on the West Coast. And so just a couple more questions. So my next question for you is, will you tell us what you're doing now, aside of your PhD program? Will you tell us about your foundation and all of that?
Yeah, so after I was finished going, because, so school was that thing for me that kept me going and kept me moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so after I graduated with my master's, I actually graduated last August, so it hasn't been that long. And, of course, the healing journey is definitely not a linear journey. I say this all the time. It is an up and down journey. You're going to fall. You're going to get up. You're going to sometimes make mistakes, and that's okay, because I think one of the things with military and veteran people is that our females, even males or females, we tend to forget that we're human and that we don't have the answers for everything, and it's okay to not be okay, even if you're a veteran, right? Even if you're not a combat veteran, if you are a combat veteran, all of those things, it's okay to say that you're not okay. And that's what I had to learn going through all the emotions that I went through. And so after I graduated, I decided that I kind of wanted to become more vocal about my experiences, really as a healing journey for myself, because I kept it all in. Even like throughout my bachelor's and my master's, a lot of people who I've come to know and have known me in a professional setting have no clue that I have ever gone through any of these things, because I keep it very private. And I don't tell everybody about, the things that I had gone through. And they would never have assumed. They're just like, and if any of it comes out, people are just like, wait, what? I would never have guessed that about you. You look like you have it all together. You know, and of course, I don't have it all together. Everybody has their moments, right? Well, none of us are perfect.
Oh, we all.
And so I started using a Facebook and my Instagram to kind of speak about my experiences, and I use it usually in like a therapeutic lens or like almost like a case vignette, you know. And for me, my primary purpose is I want to identify the gaps that I fell through so that nobody else falls through these cracks as well. And so Invisible Combat is what I started. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm actually in the process of developing my website. So it's in the process. It's about to hopefully go live fairly soon. I have to just get a few things sorted out for that, where I'm going to be openly doing research and blogging about some of the things that are really important to me, like mental health, of course. Moral injury is something that I speak about a lot. And here locally, because I was looking for supportive services for myself and I couldn't find a lot of female-specific stuff for me here in my own town, I decided to go ahead and form a committee. So I'm in the development. I actually have some ladies. Right now it's kind of put on hold because of all the extra stuff that's happening right now, the chaos. So we're actually going to start doing Zoom meetings just so we can be really clear on some of the things that we're going to do going forward. I'm really big on intercollaboration. I want all of the organizations here in my town to be on the same page when it comes to helping veterans, especially for female veterans. So I work full time, but I also volunteer in the court, in the veteran treatment court, mentoring females because we don't have enough. Actually, I'm the only one. I'm the only female veteran that works here locally in that respect. And so I have that going on. I do some crisis intervention on the side as well, volunteer. And then, of course, this Invisible Combat thing that I'm starting to develop, where we were starting to plan like some local events because, you know, isolation is such a really big thing when it comes to veterans, especially female veterans, because so often we feel invisible. Like you had mentioned before, we were talking about we don't access services because we feel like we don't belong there, or maybe we have a lack of trust in the system. And so getting us together and being able to empower each other and share our stories and all of this is really important. It's really important to me. So I run a support group online as well, and I've been working on some like online events, especially now while things are so uncertain, and doing the supportive resources for that. So I have a lot of things in the works. It's kind of new and it's developing as it goes, but I have a lot of vision and I have a lot of support. A lot of people have been supporting me on this. And of course, my PhD, I want my research to be, you know, focused on one of the elements of supporting veterans even more. So that's all going to be developing as it goes along.
That is
I have a lot
amazing.
of stuff going on, but yeah.
I feel you, first of all, because I always have a lot of stuff going on as well. So I feel you, but I understand your passion, and I know what it feels like to come from a heart that wants to serve and wants to give back. And I can tell you that I felt what you were saying about your healing journey, like 1,000%. And the important part for me, and the first part for me on my healing journey, was giving back, was turning around and giving back. And that started 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't even think, I mean, I didn't even have the foresight to just join the American Legion or the DAV or like an organization or to form my own. I was just like grassroots, like, oh, MySpace back in the day, like, oh my God, there's a female veteran or a male veteran in need. Let me reach out to them. They sound like they're suicidal. That seems really sad. I'm going to reach out to them. I don't know them, but it says they're a veteran. You know what I mean? Like, and it was just one of those things, even veterans I knew, you know, so one of those things where I just felt compelled to help. But in doing so, I realized that it was helping me. And it's been going on. And last year, and the part where you said that you have to mourn the person you were before a trauma. Oh my God, girl. I mean, I'm not sure if realer words have ever been spoken. I mean, you do. You have to just grieve the end of that person. And not that, you know, I experienced a trauma with the end of my marriage and what the catalyst for it, which I won't really go into now, but it was super traumatic for me. And the person, the stay-at-home mom, that I was. And, all of that came to an end very quickly, and I realized I had to change my life. And so that person and all her dreams and all of her goals had to be mourned. But it took me on a different trajectory, which led me to my next evolution of serving, which was this podcast and getting to meet amazing women like you. So, and having this amazing sisterhood, right? So I think it's beautiful what you're doing, and all the work that you do for veterans and for females and for incarcerated women. It's just so honorable, I think is the right word. And to see how far you've come after everything you went through, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your story, honestly. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I think it's really important to show people that human side of trauma and of overcoming it, because people get stagnant in their trauma, especially right afterwards. And you kind of have to, because it's not a normal part of our narrative. We don't expect trauma to interrupt that narrative. And when it does, you're like, what now? What do I do? How do I ever see myself getting over this? And you have to mourn. It's so important. And then also to have that human component of it, to understand that other people go through this and that you're not by yourself, and 100% not by yourself. If you had told me 6 years ago, because it's only been 6 years, since I've been on this journey, and if you told me 6 years ago that I was going to be entering my PhD program and I was going to be at the space that I'm at now, I would not have believed you. I would have been like, that's insane. That's never going to happen. So you can't limit your views or your goals or your dreams, right? Because 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you're going to look back and be like, wow, I didn't even know that I could go this far, right, in my life, and all these different things that happened. But if you just continue to keep going and never stop, eventually you'll get there. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. In fact, I wasn't going to say this, but it seems like an appropriate time to make an announcement. I have been working on a coaching program that I'm going to roll out for female veterans next month in April.
Wow, congratulations.
Yes, and because I want to see my sisters succeed, and everything I've learned at the London Real Academy on how to effectively help people transform their lives and attain their goals in a rapid amount of time, I think I would be doing a great disservice to my sisters and keeping that to myself. So I'm gonna.
That's amazing.
I'm gonna bring that out, and I actually thought of it because when you were saying it's a mindset, and that is that's the first lesson is the mindset.
Yes.
And then following a success path. So it kind of tied in with what you were saying. And so I thought I would bring it out. But, okay. So
that's amazing.
I have 2 more questions for you before we wrap it up.
Yes. Well, first I want to say that I think that is so important that you're doing that, because knowing that you do this female veteran podcast, you have heard the real life experiences of these women, because, for me, I'm very analytical. I do a lot of data, a lot of research. But the numbers and the data, they don't tell you the human component of it. So I don't think it's as effective just spewing out numbers and data. It's not going to connect with people. But that human component, the human stories, the human experiences, those are real. And those will give you so much more insight onto how to help people, just knowing the real life experiences that people have gone through. So I think that will also be very helpful. And I can see this being very successful for you. I'm very excited for you.
Oh, my God. Thank you so much. It makes my heart feel so happy. But number one, I just want to see people succeed, and I'm not going to charge ridiculous rates or anything like that. But I can only take, because I coach so much already, I can only take a few. It's very limited. So I can only take a few people at a time. But hopefully we'll get them set on their path of achieving their goals, if not hitting some of those goals within an 8-week time period, and seeing some positive turnaround and seeing some paradigm shift the way mine has in such a rapid time, and yours as well. Once you get your mind right and you start to realize what you are capable of and that you can do it, a lot is possible. Anything's possible.
Absolutely. And then all of those people that you coach, even if a little bit of small amount that you do coach and they become successful, they are going to touch all the people that they touch, and they're going to influence and motivate all those people. So really, you don't limit yourself because you're saying you only help a few people, because they're going to go on and do amazing, great things and touch so many lives. So really, it's like a domino effect. You're just going to be touching all these lives with those little bits of women that you're touching. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for putting that perspective onto it. I love that so much. Thank you.
Yes.
And so, okay, with that said, we're going to wrap this up in a minute. But
yes,
I know that you have already given us so much wonderful advice, actually. You have. But I'm going to ask you, is there any one last piece of advice, tip, trick, or strategy that could help one of our or all of our veteran sisters thrive?
Yeah, and even so some of the advice right now that I'm going to give some of the women who, because I know people listen to your podcast probably who are thinking about going into the military. Like you have females that maybe listen to this podcast to get a more educated perspective of whether or not they should join.
I hope so.
So yeah, me too. I hope so too, because it does put a lot of things in perspective. I mean, I hope they don't get scared to not join, because some of the, my story is super traumatic, but there are positive things. I don't know if I mentioned did I mention that the drill sergeant that I had spoken to that had helped me out?
Yes.
During the first part of it. Yeah. So there are amazing people in the military, even with the trauma that I had experienced. So don't let that affect your decision to join. I think, sometimes you can forget in the military about your feminine side, because you're trying to blend in so much in that male-dominated culture that you have to be careful with that groupthink. So I talk about this on my blog sometimes about groupthink. It's so serious, and it can really severely limit your ability to advocate for yourself or think for yourself and see things outside of that male-dominated culture if you're trying so hard to blend in. So, don't ever allow anybody's negative opinion of you or, any of those things to limit, your self-efficacy or to limit your capabilities, because unfortunately the military is very male-dominated. We see it in the data, right? It's in the numbers. It's definitely embedded in the culture. We see that male-dominated culture very predominantly in the military. But so I don't want any women or even veterans coming out to ever lose yourself, or just allow any of that to make you second-guess yourself, because you have to do self-affirmations, right? I'm all about affirmations. I'm all about manifesting all that greatness, right? You got to manifest it. You got to be very strong. You're resilient, right? You know your resources. Just know your resources. Don't be afraid to use them, because I think too often, for me personally, I was afraid to use my resources because of what other people said or did that affected that about me. I don't think it's not healthy for you, and you have resources. Don't be afraid to use them. Make sure you authentically show up, because you have to know your strengths, and you have to play to those strengths and develop them, right? Because you are strong, and people I think they limit that when they don't think about their own strengths and they just focus on their weaknesses, especially in the military, right? Because we have to be resilient, we have to be mentally tough, right? And then we forget about all the wonderful strengths that we have. So you'll be successful. You just have to remember that about yourself in the military, or even after you leave the military too.
You'll be successful.
So that's my big advice. Yes, definitely. Don't forget that. Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that. You'll be successful.
You have to
don't forget that about yourself.
Yes, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I will be successful. And you have to make that decision. How I was saying, that pivotal moment in your life where, you have two different roads. You can either go down this road where, you're going to hit rock bottom over and over and over again, or you can go down the other road. You can say, I'm going to succeed, and I don't care what I have to do it, but I'm going to do it, right? Because you're able to do it. You're fully capable. So don't ever forget that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that beautiful advice.
You're welcome.
I hope it touches a lot of lives. I do. And so I know you said that we could find you on Instagram and Facebook, and you have a website coming out soon. So we know where to find you. What is your name your username on Instagram and Facebook?
Yeah, it's actually Invisible Combat. So I have the same social handle on every single one of my social media. So Instagram, Facebook, and even I'm pretty generic. Like even my email is invisiblecombat@gmail.com. So you can find me. Just put that in there, and you'll be able to find me. And then I also have that Facebook support group that I run, which is located on my Invisible Combat Facebook. And I think it's Invisible Combat Women's Military Support Group or something real generic like that. But you'll be able to find it on my page too. And I think actually during this time, because everything's so uncertain, I'm starting to think about doing like some Facebook Lives where we talk about mental health or something like that. So hopefully that's going to be coming out soon. I'm working on some of the content. I think that'll be helpful, especially right now. Yeah, it's just everyone's so uncertain, and I know some of the women in my group are really stressed out about, because when we have post-traumatic stress disorder or when we're dealing with, mental health challenges, this is a very scary time.
Absolutely.
Because, we're still healing, and people that are healing, of course, this is going to be additional stress, and I don't think people realize, just how stressful that can be on people who are still trying to heal themselves, right?
Absolutely. I actually think you should do some Instagram lives. I think you should do blogging. This is my personal opinion as someone who does this. But I think you should do all of that stuff because your insight is very helpful and there's something really soothing about you. So I think that
Thank you.
It would be really helpful for a lot of our sisters out there. And so I'll keep a lookout for that and maybe even remind you from time to time that you should blog.
I appreciate that. Yes, I'm planning on doing a blog on my page. Like I do a lot of research already on like moral injury and things like that. And like I said, with me, education was key to helping me get over some of the things that I was going through, because I needed that what is it that I needed to put a name on some of the things that were happening to me, and it was very helpful to know that I was completely normal and that there was nothing wrong with me. And I think a lot of people probably need to hear that too. Yeah. Just because you have trauma, it does not mean anything's wrong with you. Even if you are maladaptively coping, even if you're surviving by any means necessary, you are having a human reaction to trauma. And that is okay. I mean, yes, we need to start working on more healthy ways to cope, right? Because that's going to get you into some issues. But it's completely normal, and you are having a normal human experience, like to trauma, to something in your narrative that wasn't supposed to be there, right?
I love
so yeah, definitely.
I think we could all agree that we love that. That was awesome. And thank you so much for sharing it. In fact, I probably personally could talk to you about this stuff for like another 2-3 hours. But yes. I think we got to wrap it up. So I want to say to you again, thank you so much for coming on and being so candid and open and emotional, like raw, real. This is exactly what this podcast is about, and sharing your story and hopefully inspiring other women to, no matter where they are in their journey, to keep moving forward and have that success mindset.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And with that, you guys, we're going to wrap this episode up. Thank you so much for listening and for coming on this journey with me. I appreciate you guys so much. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.